for being here with us at our AI at Work, Zoning Conversation in hiring, management, and compensation. Obviously, a very important topic for both the private sector and government. As we're thinking about all these things, AI is blowing up. I've got a great panel of folks here today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their work and how it relates to AI in the workforce.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Annika Nguyen. I'm the Program Director for the Labor Futures Program at Data and Society Research Institute. My background actually comes out of worker rights and worker organizing, where I worked with a grassroots, on-the-ground organizing workers in low-wage industries that we believe were sticky, not likely to be offshored or automated. Turns out neither was true. But it was a great learning experience to really understand what were the issues affecting workers as technology automation was coming into play. And at Data and Society, I specifically focused on workplace surveillance and datafication of work, how data extraction and how data is now the basis by which a lot of work is managed, but also classified. And that goes into conversation and hiring. We also recently are starting to move to gender and growth, trying to understand how this technology is affecting right now it's primarily workers into creative industries and also animators. People have been doing a lot of work primarily overseas in training the systems to identify and do a top show. For example, there are people who do this all the time. And how that has been scaffolding the production and release of solutions for the actual stuff. Thank you.
Great. My name is Ben Melrose, also advisor at the White House. The White House has focused on AI and tech policy broadly, and it's very closely with the wider definitions of the White House is doing in regards to AI, the recent executive order that was last year.
Nice to see you all again. And I think that the Studies and Transformation is Mexico, so I'm responsible for all business strategy, obviously business transformation, digital AI, technology, and cyber within Mexico. And for us, AI is a key important topic of our strategy as an organization. We will not hear that from many big enterprises. At the core of the business strategy is the AI and data strategy, because we want to design the company in terms of business model, the people experience on how we experience it, the priorities, the business priorities, all anchored around data transformation, digital transformation, and AI transformation. And we have one big mission. One is what we have been working with Aspen to redesign the future of manufacturing in the US, powered by AI. What does it mean to be a manufacturing company in this era? And the second, with a couple of our other peers across industries to set the standards on how ethical usage of AI can be proliferated across the US, of course, and internationally. Thanks, Vivian.
Hi, I'm Vivian Schiller. I'm Vice President and Executive Director of Aspen Digital. We're a program of the Aspen Institute that focuses on the impact of technology on society. So as you might imagine, AI has always been part of our work, but in the last year and a half, since rolling it out to AI, you know, those of us that have been in AI for a long time, where have you been, people? But since then, it's really been a big focus of our work. And among the things that we look at the impact of AI on are labor issues. And so, as Athena mentioned, the focus of some work that we've been doing for the last year is specifically about how to integrate AI into and automation into manufacturing processes without, and this is key, not only without hurting frontline job quality or frontline job workers, but actually empowering them and giving them more skills in order to thrive. And it's a win-win. That's it. That's the keys.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to start with Ben. Many of us here are obviously focused on policy. We're in Washington. We're all policy nerds. So let's just start with a broad question about how the White House is thinking about issues of workforce and AI. Is it being positive, negative? What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I would say a few words on that. As President Biden said, obviously AI brings with it enormous potential and promise as well as enormous risks. And I think that With workforce in particular, that's where you can really see a lot of that come true. AI has created a ton of uncertainty. If you look at Willing or something like 4 in 10 Americans who say that they simply don't know whether AI will help them or hurt them in the workplace. And another 1 in 4 Americans roughly express both, which is fear of becoming obsolete. So, given that obviously there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of people talking about, I will say a little bit about how we're thinking about the benefits and risks, at least at this stage. This obviously was a big part of the executive order on the independent risk management, which really stands up for workers and tries to deliver key protections that we need to empower and drive the economy as we want to deploy it. So thinking, on the benefit side, obviously, there's ways that AI can automate certain tasks that are rote or mundane or less interesting to workers in ways that improve their lives, so make them more productive, or allow them to spend their time doing other things that are more engaging parts of their job. So if you look at healthcare, for example, when hospitals have to see a patient, there's dozens of forms, or over a dozen forms they need to fill out on average. And there's ways that AI can be used with appropriate oversight, of course, to bring data from one form to another, from records to one record to another, and fill in some of that content in ways that allow hospitals to spend more time actually seeing patients. There's similar examples in the education space where the Department of Education had a really good report out last year that explains some of the ways that AI shows potential, at least, that helps teachers with lesson planning and tasks like that will free time up for them to spend more time one-on-one with students. So those are some of the benefits, of course, but there's a large set of risks as well that we're very focused on. And I think that there's really 2 categories I like in terms of where the risks break out. So the first is risks to the quality of job, and then there's obviously a set of risks around job displacement or labor disruptions. So with the job quality risk, I think that's really where we are certainly seeing these risks manifest in certain parts of the economy, kind of all over the country. And what we're also seeing workers, including through collective bargaining efforts, take important steps to address these risks. So we can hear a lot about this set of risks from the conversation we hold with workers, from civil society, organized labor groups like that, the White House, conversations and listening sessions, which highlight with call center workers, for example. We've heard about times when AI with automated prompt generation tools generate inaccurate responses to customers' questions, but those workers are still responsible for giving those responses, which creates worse customer service outcomes for everyone. We hear similar risks from wide variety of fronts, from automated surveillance tools, privacy, risks to workers being organized, fair pay issues. Workers are not, the amount of time that they're working is kind of captured. So those are all things in the job quality space. So again, we're seeing those things really happen today, and again, it's important to take steps to address them so quickly. On the displacement side, I'll just say quickly, that's a set of risks where I think that the near term at least, we think that AI is more likely in general to change jobs rather than to displace them entirely. But there are, of course, exceptions, and some occupations might be more risky than others, and that's certainly somewhere where we are watching very closely what's going on in the market, as well as watching the developments. Screenwriters, for example, recently negotiated key actions to prevent artificial intelligence from fully replacing human scriptwriters. So those are all important developments that we're mindful of. Over a longer time horizon, I think there's a lot more uncertainty, and we've seen in the past how new technologies really didn't change or it caused some workers to be displaced or they create new jobs in other domains. But again, it's hard to predict ex ante, I think, where exactly some of these effects will occur, and a lot will depend, of course, on the pace at which guys adopt to deploy travel economy. And the last thing I'll say here, I suppose, is that all that said, it is really critical to even work now to think about what are the supports that workers actually need from the federal government to make sure that they actually can share fairly the increased productivity gains from AI, and that they have the supports they need to thrive, set up in advance before some of these changes may actually take place.
And I mean, the AI executive order, came out last year. When you were having conversations about the obviously this technology is changing very fast. So how do you think about sort of future-proofing government guidance about something as dynamic as generative AI?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And it's certainly a real challenge that we grapple with as policymakers. I think there's one simple answer to that, and developing AI policy making, as I think about it, it's an iterative process that requires multiple layers of overlapping governance in places. I'll say a couple of things quickly. I think One is, if you look at the approach to administration statements for AI, we started with outlining a lot of the key foundational principles, such as through documents like the Blueprint for AI Bill of Rights, through the National Institute of Standards and Technologies through their AI disclosure framework, that really established kind of key, what I would start as landmark evergreen principles that, the way that we apply them in the future might change, in certain ways as AI is being used to develop and deployed in new ways. But I think that it's important to have us really overarching risk management principles going forward. The other thing I'll say is, agencies, including as directed by the executive order, I can speak more about this later too, but they are certainly engaged in really in-depth study on a lot of these issues. So there's a lot more that we have to learn from the federal government, including as the Department of Labor and Council of Economic Advisors who are doing in-depth study on what the potential, labor market impacts may be in the future. So this is somewhere where I don't want to front run anything that they might find, but we want to learn more as well.
Thank you. I think I'll go to you for a second. We talked last year about some of the AI processes that Pepsi had already put into place, both in manufacturing, supply chain management, other business processes. So, it's been a while since then. Can you tell us about some of the lessons learned about the AI implementations already done at Pepsi, and what you might change or what you might add based on that knowledge?
Sure. And I'm not sure everyone understands the footprint of PepsiCo, but just to explain the complexity. We are a 63 billion business in the US, on a portion of the US, between our snacks portfolio, which is the Doritos, the Cheetos, the Lay's, our beverages portfolio, which is the Gatorade, the Pepsi, and of course our breakfast association is great. I'm giving you this complexity because we do source to sell. And what does source to sell means? We are one of the biggest agro companies in the world, so we have agriculture and partners. We manufacture our own products, which means everything from the raw materials to the creation of the product, we do it ourselves. We move that product, so we are the second logistics provider after UPS in the US, right? And then we provide those products to the retailers with our own people, so we sell that product, right? And we do also last mile delivery. So we impact X thousands of requests, but we have almost 110,000 employees just now. This level of complexity is not. We have the biggest cloud infrastructure, data infrastructure, and AI infrastructure than any other industry in the US. And that's not an exaggeration. Compared to the second, which is Walmart, we are 30% bigger than Walmart when it comes to our data, cloud, and AI infrastructure. Because of that complexity in our supply chain. So, back to your question on AI systems for us, utilizing AI systems at scale is not a nice to have, it's a must have. Why? Because we need to ensure that we always have true efficiency when it comes to our packaging plants. We need to ensure that when it comes to health and safety of our buildings and facilities, we drive zero accidents. Right? There is the inspection of quality and the audit and everything that we do. We need to ensure that our truck drivers, that is one of our biggest unions, and one of the biggest unions also in the US, use the AI technology responsibly also for asset maintenance and training and scaling. And lastly, our sales people are able to use AI for guided selling for both the consumers and for the business. We have seen projects so far in the implementation, which we are, I would say, at scale of the third year of implementation. One is improved productivity and efficiency from 10 to 70%. It varies depending on the area. And we haven't laid off anyone. I want to make sure this is very clear. For us, we're not using AI to optimize the workforce in terms of number of FTEs. Is to drive additional productivity and efficiency out of the existing workforce. That's why we have done an extensive upskilling and scaling in Digital Academy. We call it Digital Academy, where kind of all our employees have been through waves of data, AI, digital training across every spectrum of technology and practical application we have done. Lastly, I would say the biggest risk for governments like us is not on the front line. Companies like in the manufacturing space, who is impacted is the frontline, and the person that sells or the person who manufactures. Actually, it's not that. It's financial planners, right? Do you need to have as many financial planners when you have automated AI forecasts? Right? Do you need to have so many HR people? And if you can do employee experience in a much more digitalized way. So for companies like us, the biggest business, they don't use worker base. It's only the frontline base. The frontline, the NPS score and the adoption of AI systems has been off the charts. And that's why it was critical the use cases when we bring an announcement is to hear from the frontline on how AI is making the jobs better, more efficient, and creates a better future for the companies.
But can you tell us a little bit about that project and what you learned?
Yeah, it was fascinating. You know, I bring as a recovering journalist, I go into everything with a great deal of skepticism. But I came out of this project as sort of a true believer in terms of the benefit. If done right, the benefit to frontline workers around AI adoption. So a couple of things that we discovered. First of all,
Can you tell us when you did this?
sorry.
When did this take place?
Oh, in the past year.
Okay.
Yeah. So look, we're still early days on this. I mean, one of the things to keep in mind is the vast majority, not everybody is PepsiCo, the vast majority of manufacturers are small players. They are really not far along at all, to put it mildly, in terms of their AI automation adoption. There are also various sort of guidelines for manufacturers or companies in terms of resources to help decision makers and others. But here's what we know. We know that AI deployment without worker involvement leads to it's not just bad for the workers, of course it's bad for the workers, it's bad for the companies because it's lower job quality, it's reduced retention, and it's reduced worker skills. So this is not, the need for companies to do this is not about some kind of charity or kindness towards humans, it actually also has a bottom line benefit. And so, our guidelines that we put out, which I'm happy to share, focus on sort of reducing risk of automation systems, upskilling workers, and worker retention. And interestingly, Ben talked a little bit about sort of collective bargaining. This is an area where employers and unions are aligned because, or can be aligned if done right. Of course, there are ways to do this wrong in terms of retention. So what's needed is leadership it's great that PepsiCo is leading in this space. We need more companies to influence this space because it will influence the entire supply chain. We need employers to incorporate worker voices for job quality AI adoption. It's about job quality. It can't just be from the manufacturer's point of view. The focus cannot just be on numbers of revenue. That will fail. It will fail for the company. It will certainly fail for the frontline workers. It's got to be on job quality and will improve systems all around.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your line of work, she just said not everyone's Pepsi. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in your research and the things that you worry about?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's great to hear that Pepsi did that. I think that that's a good point to make a distinction between labor savings versus efficiency. Because there's a lot of supposed labor savings that really isn't labor savings, it's just shifting the labor onto workers, and it's done invisibly. A clear example of this, I'll take the federal government. At the same time that sort of some of the medical modernization was happening with digitizing medical records, there was a bill in the 21st Century Cures Act which required that most care workers had to participate in an electronic visit verification system, which was basically going to document down to the minute or 15-minute increments how they did their work, and this would determine everything from how much time they had, or how much money, how much time we had to provide services to a client, and how much time clients were allocated. The problem was the technology would say you have 15 minutes to bathe someone. That sounds great. Most of us maybe take 15 minutes to bathe. The problem is with bathing someone who is disabled, not fully mobile, or has dementia. They're not going to as easily get to the tub or get out of the tub, or even agree to it. So what happened was there was an opportunity for these employees, workers, to actually say, having the impact of power, right, longer. So what they would do is they would absorb that because they have relationships with their clients, with their disabled or senior care people, and so they would do that out of out-of-pocket and not get paid. So I think that there's a clear difference between how we look at data and what the impact of that. Now, that been coupled with technology that helped someone get a person who was not in a role into that, out of backup, that would have been great. So I think that we need to see that sometimes the costs of doing this work, and sometimes that's risk as well as also shifting. And another example is sort of the conversation over Lyft and how to classify workers as independent contractors and not employees. That's another way of like shifting the costs of doing business. Unemployment, healthcare, retirement, taxes, everything is shifted on employees. So I think there's different ways to look at that situation. And I think, if that were the case, we talked about the screen actor sales. Part of their concern was that the industry was changing broadly. The residuals they were receiving from a lot of their work was not what it used to be. So the shifts may be in the task, but maybe in the industry as well. So to kind of go back to the question for Ben about where can the government really provide guidance and assistance in thinking more broadly about not just the scaling, but sort of how changing and the business model for that, and making sure that worker protections are part of that, because some of this is this is not new. Misclassification of workers is not new. It's been happening for a very long time. How do we strengthen those protections, because technology can often offer a rhetorical argument for changing work that may actually not materialize on the ground.
Is there anything specific you would point to that you'd love to see the government doing right now to sort of set some of those protections in order?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think one of the things that California has started to adopt and still needs improvement is California has a Consumer Data Protection Act, but it until recently, it didn't apply to workers. It only applied to consumers, and it takes a very consumer perspective. You are a consumer. You have the right and the choice to not use something because you don't like it. You can go somewhere else. When you're a worker, that really isn't the case. If your boss comes to you and says you must use this app for tracking the medical equipment that you're responsible for in a hospital, you can't say no. And there's a legitimate reason for that, right? You want to patient equipment. You can't say no. And that equipment is attached to you, so it's tracking you as well. And it could require fingerprint, iris scan, face scan in order to access that technology. So there is no real space there to say yes or no and have control over that data. And it's also collective data. It's not what you do alone that determines your workload, it's what your entire staff does, all of the people. So collective data rights is one place that we can start thinking about.
National privacy law? Maybe we can work on that. That's what I worked on now. Yeah. That was about we'll see if that's good. That would be a helpful conversation. But yeah. Does Athena or Vivian, do you have any response to what you just said based on just your experiences with researching and on the ground at Pepsi?
Yeah, for our workers, as Vivian said, they participate in the design of the AI system. So it has been a much more collaborative approach. Now, if you bring the project process.
Let's make sure we can talk about that.
Yeah. Right, it's on the book, people are coming along in the journey, and therefore you know from the moment you might establish the system, then you use the system. Now, on the other hand, it's more time. Because they have to be part of the testing experience, not just the design experience. And we've seen it, I'll give you one example of our drivers. Right? It's the kind of landscape and the executive landscape of AI when it comes to driving is very different with the test compared to the rest of the world. So we have drivers in Europe that they are more than happy to have cameras looking out and in. Right? So forward-facing cameras and inward-facing cameras, right? For safety reasons, etc. Are unions in the US? No. We just want cameras facing outside. Absolutely fine for us. I mean, we respect that. I mean, we still manage to improve kind of the safety when it comes to the delivery of the vehicle and the asset maintenance. If they don't want to use other cameras, I mean, we make sure that the conditions emissions are being tracked within the track in a very effective way, but we don't capture the biometrics. But that's a choice. And we are not forcing the employees in this case. And to have one single approach everywhere we are is so they can opt in or opt out. But what we are trying to do in the lack of rules, guidelines, and regulation, we have to create those with our employees. And this is kind of what our ask is can we have some, I would say, universal metrics, guidelines, and frameworks, and security regulation, and for us to be able to move as an industry much faster.
Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just that I think that there's, there are policy recommendations that can help, including, establish a regulatory framework to incentivize companies to do this work. And the federal government, has a role to play in terms of your procurement processes are very powerful in terms of incentivizing those behaviors. So.
You listening to them? Yes.
It is, yeah.
Is there, so Athena, so far, what have you seen out of the government, whether it's been an executive order or a couple of proposals for Congress, obviously nothing's passed yet, a couple of, guidance to different agencies. What has been useful so far and helped FC with this AI implementation, and what are you waiting on to be like absolutely critical?
The guidelines that we did say is a step to the right direction for us, and we were with one of the companies who provided domains when they had a portion of visual fee, and we had submitted our own AI framework, and so we contributed also to the guidelines and the framework. And we see that there is a bipartisan appetite to find a way of integrating AI, providing at least some approach on how to use AI responsibly. And we would like more of that. And eventually, that would lead to maybe regulation in a couple of years or not. But to do it in a much more deliberate way, what do I mean by that? We want to regulate AI without having data guidance approach. Right? I mean, you cannot say, I want to publish complete AI systems, and you don't have the equivalent of GDPR that exists in Europe. So there needs to be a law of things that need to be established, that have to approach governments and standards, don't be a regulation, different approach, and that will be super helpful for the industries. So we would like consistency, a roadmap that doesn't ask only the sexy part that was in AI, but also goes back to the principles of how we all started, which is data privacy and data standards.
And Ben, can you name any, before the AI conversation, do you agree that sort of baseline privacy and other digital protections would be useful to, as a baseline before we start talking about specific AI regulations? And, the White House Congress to do something on that?
The president has been pretty clear in calling on Congress to act by bipartisan legislation. It's long past time you can argue that Congress needs us to do that. Meanwhile, of course, President Biden is doing everything he can in his administration to use existing authorities to protect Americans' privacy, and we've seen agencies take a number of steps to do that. But to your question about the legislative side, I think that the president has been clear about that, as I said. I will also add that I think AI really does, it brings a lot of these issues of privacy front and center, I think, for a couple of reasons. AI on the one hand, it enables a lot of data collection and it enables abilities to develop inferences from new data in ways that make the consequences of poor privacy protections even more significant based on the capabilities that it gives us. But it also expands the incentives, I think, for companies to engage in data collection in the first place, given what companies can do with the form of data. It's the issue of not just individual data, but collective data across the board, groups, as you said earlier. So certainly, privacy again needs to be front and center of this conversation about AI as well.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think, just as far as what else the government could be doing to be helpful at this stage? Yes. Sorry.
I think one of the things that the government has to do is the Department of Labor issued an executive order looking at how, because it's the worker surveillance that leads to data collection, and some of that worker surveillance it's just a camera, it's watching everything. It doesn't necessarily just say, I will only collect this metric, collect much metrics, many metrics, and that can be repurposed in many ways. And so the executive order, or the legal memo basically said we need to make sure that this is encouraging our workers' rights to take collective action. And this really goes back and supports this idea of like making sure workers are part of the conversation early on. A lot of people are talking about how workers have to participate in the deployment of technology, but we all know frontline workers' opinion is not nearly as important as the CEOs. So how is the collective voice, or what could amount to like one suggestion could be like it is emphatically applied. And I'll play it to you, but not everyone. Or it will be a fix that's not returned. So I think that being able to put those protections in place so there's like a little more even level playing field in these conversations is important. And I think, just to talk about generative AI a little bit, writers and artists are very concerned because their work is written with script. And so there's a lot of conversations happening around trademark, which is one step, but it's not the only one. I think I just had a talk last week with an artist, a rocker, an artist, and a model, and they were really concerned about the future of the industry because some younger artists were thinking, does it even make sense for me to enter this occupation if my work can just be straight wholesale? So there has to be some regulations on the companies that are collecting this data, sometimes completely illegally, even using the artist's name illegally in fraud.
Yeah. I'm sure we're going to want to help copyright and
As a journalist,
as well. Yeah, absolutely. I do want to leave some time for audience questions. Before I do that, I'd like everyone to tell me a thing they found useful or helpful about AI and something that keeps them thinking. And we can start.
A thing that is hopeful is that AI does not have to be instead of, it can be in addition to. And I think that applies to so many things. Here we're talking about, at least specifically the work we're talking about.
Risks capture those benefits appropriately. In terms of things that keep me up at night, this isn't necessarily a terrifying thing, but just in terms of something that shows how daunting the task really is. I think that when I think about AI, it's such a cross-cutting area of policy right now. It really touches on everything that we do in government, and it involves certainly almost every federal agency, if not all federal agencies, in terms of thinking about what the right approach to AI is. There's a reason that the executive order last year is almost 20,000 words. It's so long because there's frankly so much to do, both in government and beyond government. And I think a lot of that obviously adds up to a pretty daunting set of tasks. There's a great deal of work to be done, which we signed up to do. I'm confident that we can do it, but certainly, it makes you appreciate the enormity of the challenge.
I will start with the nightmare first because I want to end on a positive note. The other day I was having a conversation and someone was talking about how there's a movement in Iran for women to remove the hijab because it's become a symbol of control by very conservative groups. But every time she asked an AI generator, I think it was Midjourney, to create an image of an Iranian woman with freedom fighter, they kept putting the hijab back on, regardless of what she did. So I think that there's this potential of AI just sort of consolidate a particular image of people, even though we as a society are trying to evolve. So that was kind of a little concerning because this is like a movement, a national movement. But the positive is that she was also seeing new people creating new images and flooding the internet with more. So there is definitely a space to change that. And we, and during the pandemic, even the idea of a retail worker or a delivery worker became an essential worker. And they were able to use that moment to really change who they were. And technology was a big part of that. It was a communications tool that allowed them to really change how they identified themselves. So that's a positive.
Absolutely. And with that, I'm going to open it up to folks in the audience who might want to talk to our esteemed panelists? Any questions? Go ahead.
My name is Derek White. I used to be an MP in England. If there was an AI council somewhere in the world, would America join it?
It's a little hard to I was about to say it is hard to say without any more specifics. I think that what I can say though is, separately from the context of a hypothetical AI council, it is very clear that the administration takes very seriously the need for engagement and cooperation with allies and partners in other countries abroad, and that certainly is a key priority in the executive order as well, which really I think sets up key next steps for the administration to do that sort of work in collaboration with others in key areas related to AI. So, again, I won't speak to necessarily exactly what, future structures of a hypothetical AI council might involve or entail, but I think, to get at the spirit behind your question, absolutely, it absolutely is a priority to be engaging and collaborating closely with other countries in that respect.
Go ahead.
I'm Kathy Kleiman. Thank you so much for this panel. I'm part of the group that founded ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, so multi-stakeholder models. So let me draw an analogy and then ask the question. So we formed, when the GDPR was founded, we wanted to know what the implication would be on the global internet and domain name system. And we formed a group with US attorneys and Europeans and international attorneys and others. And we mandated that everybody study a little bit about the GDPR before they walked in. It's not the easiest legislation, and it's not what you think it is. So now when we're talking about employee and worker involvement in AI decisions, what type, CEOs have advisors and attorneys and data scientists advising them. What background, what training should there be for the employees and the workers so that they can walk into the room and get a knowledgeable opinion? And I really value your thoughts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I take that first and then, well, firstly, let me say, my role was established because of that. It didn't exist in the organization. Let's start with that, right? So, and I report directly to the chairman and CEO, and partly because we wanted to ensure that everything we do from a strategy to implementation falls under one organization. So one is you have to start from the exco of the organization. You need someone who wakes up every day and ensures that whatever we do strategically looks at all the implications of technology to the business and the strategy. So that's one. Second, my two greatest partners in the company is HR and legal. HR and legal. Legal, yeah. So our chief counsel and our people officer is where we partner both in terms of upskilling and reskilling on one. Also, we have the academy, we work with the HR, and legal, we have together established the responsible business framework for the company, which is being assessed by the board as it relates to AI twice a year and as it relates to other areas like cyber every quarter. So we have elevated the criticality of AI systems up to the board. So this is overly important. The last part for me, which is the third pillar of the approach, we have employee forums. So I created what we call a digital ambassador community. These are people represented by all the different aspects of our business, and you will find there everyone who is an HR practitioner in Guatemala, to someone who is a truck driver in Oklahoma, to someone who is a salesperson in LA. And they act like our governing council. So we meet every 2 months. They provide feedback on the design of the systems, on the build of the systems, on the adoption of the systems, and we use them as the change ambassadors. That's why we call them the digital ambassadors of the organization. And every July, they co-present with me to the board. So when we do talk about the progress of our both digital and AI, they call it that with me in front of the board. So these are the activities, at least, that we have seen work for a company as complex and as global as PepsiCo. So everyone is part of the journey and contributes to the development and the sustain.
I'll just only add that, and this wasn't part of the work that we at Aspen did specifically with PepsiCo, but we are focused on this work, as are many others, which is the responsibility to upskill the workforce, the future workforce, the potential workforce, for that very reason. And it begins with, education, even in secondary school, and requires a multi-stakeholder approach, including for the corporations and the companies who are going to be relying on that future workforce to be knowledgeable, and for the future workforce particularly to make sure that they are prepared for, I was going to say the jobs of the future, but really increasingly it's the jobs of the present. With a focus, I would add, on making sure that we do this in a way that levels the playing field, particularly for underrepresented communities.
Are the programs doing this right now?
There's a bunch of different efforts around this that are either in motion or about to be started.
Go ahead.
Hi, Joel. I was curious, and Ashley may remember this from the AI Insight forums in the Senate, but
Can you tell them who you are, Joel?
I was previously all right. Well, Joel, previously with Senator Round's office. I was curious. In the AI Insight forums that the Senate did, I think it was Darren Acemoglu who talked about, the dramatic shifts that we're going to see in the employment and labor markets. And I wanted to understand, this question is especially for Ben, do you think that it would be, more optimal to create more free choice for people in the labor market instead of going after, more employment, more regulations for employers by basically decoupling things like healthcare and making it easier for people to switch jobs, thereby letting them choose from the companies rather than, trying to dictate what companies have to do?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and it's a great question. Certainly familiar with Daron's writing and commentary on this, which is always extremely insightful. What I will say is, the federal government, and in particular places like the Department of Labor, Council of Economic Advisors, really are doing the work to study in depth a lot of questions related to what you're saying in terms of what exactly the right support systems might be. And that includes looking both at, support systems that we've had in the past, but also thinking about new possibilities as well, right? There's a lot to consider. Again, I'm certainly don't want to front run a lot of the work and conclusions that folks that are really looking at this very in depth on a day-to-day basis are doing. But I will say that, I think that, again, the president is very eager to work with Congress in particular on these issues broadly, and he's made that intention very clear. And these are things that once we have, once we've completed the process of really doing that in-depth study, I think that these are questions that I think we'll be able to have a lot more light shed on. And there's a lot of possibilities to consider.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
What is your approach? As I read the executive order, it looks to be agnostic as to the approach that sort of companies take around generative AI. I know that the EU gave a little bit of latitude to open source technology. I was kind of curious to what's your take on it.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Other panelists might have views as well, but there's a lot of questions around open source. As I think the executive order directs the Department of Commerce to be releasing a request for information on these questions, and I will say that public input on this question from academia, from industry, civil society, labor, all sorts of stakeholders is going to be really critical, I think, for this and for other areas where the executive order directs public input to be solicited. Sorry, I apologize that I don't have too much more of a substantive answer to give at this time, but I do want to say that we recognize, obviously, there's a lot of questions around this particular set of issues, and it's one that I think we are thinking about very, very closely and working to get as much public input as possible to get at these questions.
Did we have any other questions? Going once, going twice? Joel?
No one's going to take the opportunity.
You got 3 minutes.
Thanks. One of the things that one of the panelists mentioned was kind of this international view, talking about women in Iran wearing the hijabs and how AI tools were kind of eliminating them. I think this is mostly focused on PepsiCo, but I'd be curious if anyone else has a perspective of how U.S. policymakers should think about or if there is a possibility of creating kind of our own domestic Brussels effect when we think about AI regulation, when it comes specifically to worker dignity, and how companies are really going to deal with integrating these very different worldviews. I think, I'd be very curious for PepsiCo. I mean, you're a global company. I mean, you're operating in almost every market, including like Russia and Ukraine, right? So I'd be very curious how you incorporate those very different moral views in your workforces across these different regions.
Yeah.
Great question, Joel.
No, wonderful question. And we are operating in every market in the world, yes. Including obviously markets that are in current conflict, beyond the markets that you just referred to. That's why for us policies are local. Let's start with that. So we have standards, of course, that we as a company, we want to abide with. I mentioned some of the frameworks, but data privacy laws are different if you are in Pakistan versus India. Are very different if you live in Saudi versus Iraq, right? And I just used 4 markets that we have operations. So one is we have locally data privacy teams and data teams and technology teams that make sure that we adhere to those standards, and we have legal teams that do that. But at the same time, what we want to ensure is that per different types of legislation and regulations that go beyond just data, but to your point, that's areas of dignity and human decency, we also abide with that. So I'll give you Saudi as an example. We are one of the few employees that have a whole unit which is only females, because we want them to feel very empowered, right? And we have full factories. We have one facility that is run by females because we also want them to feel that they can be plant managers and not just secretaries, just to be very clear. We have locations like Vietnam, where, because data privacy is super important, but there is no AI regulation, that we have given them the standards on AI regulation and AI privacy, and we said, why don't you stress test that based on the population and based on what you want to see in terms of application? So there is what we call freedom within a framework. We have the standards, we have the policies that we have. We've said, okay, regulation in local markets, this is what it is, so we have to abide. And then this is where we allow every market to play within the thresholds. For us, there is one element that, we always adhere, and in people's minds, we are an American company, right? We are a global company, but we are an American company. So as every other American company, we can be boycotted, we can be attacked, cyber attacked, etc. But the one thing that we don't compromise is our employees. So the underlying principle is we need to protect our employees, we need to protect the privacy of our employees, irrespective of the situation or whatever happens in the local market.
Thank you, Athena, and thank you to all of our panelists. We had a great conversation today, and yeah, we got to wrap up. So thanks everyone for coming. We'll see you around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Want to have a conversation. Thank you for hosting. I don't think I can spy on the white, that's why I'm just short supply. Let me, I'll send you an email. Sounds great. Hey, Sean, nice to meet you in person. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed the talk. Thank you. This is partnership. And it's great to hear